Dealing with difficult people when you're a leader, it's a problem. And if you're a leader, you understand the problem. Of course, there's no magic solutions that make all the troubles go away, but I think we can highlight certain actions that we as leaders can take that will help us to navigate how to deal with the difficult people in our lives. Number one, I found in my own experience that trying to resolve the issue as soon as possible offers the greatest potential for a satisfactory resolution. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we're dealing with a difficult person and we let it continue, we let it go on. We hope it's going to go away. But my experience has taught me the earlier that we confront the individual, the best possibility we have to come up with a satisfactory resolution. Many of us are afraid of confrontation, and so we try to avoid it as much as possible. Unless you confront that person, the behavior is unlikely to change. This takes courage. But after all, if we're a leader, doesn't that demand that we need courage? Secondly, minimize exposure. Oftentimes as a leader, you can see that you have perhaps a person that's very valuable to your mission, very valuable to your organization. They do their job extremely well, and they're making a great contribution, but relationally, you're not comfortable being around them, or they're difficult for you to be around. Well, sometimes the best thing to do, let them do their job, bless them in their job, and just minimize your exposure to that person. Sometimes you can do this by simply rearranging your reporting structure. In other words, I recognize here's a very talented individual, but relationally, it's probably not a good idea for me to be too closely connected. So what I do in that situation is I simply say, okay, I won't work with this person directly. I'm going to have somebody else in my organization that is working directly under me supervise this individual. Next, I would say it's very important, and perhaps this point that I'm making now should have been made as my first point. When dealing with difficult people, it's very important to ask ourselves as leaders what we may be doing to contribute to the problem. In other words, even if you're dealing with someone that you consider a difficult person, if 80% of the reason that you're struggling with this person is in fact their issue, it's their problem, and maybe 20% of the reason that you're having difficulty with this person is your problem, and I speak about myself too as a leader, I think it's very important as leaders for us to identify, where am I responsible in this relationship? Is there something wrong with my attitude? Or is there a way that I have mishandled this relationship or am currently mismanaging this relationship? I think it's important for us to identify what we can do as leaders to change the dynamics of the relationship. And if there's something that we've done as leaders wrong that has caused offense or has caused a lack of trust or has caused a breakdown, then I think it's very wise for us as leaders to apologize for the part we may have played for the breakdown in the relationship. You know, I'm so thankful and blessed that I have a wonderful relationship with my children. And it's not because I've always been the greatest father, but it's because of God's favor over my life, and because, beloved, I've always tried to apologize to my children and ask them for their forgiveness when I feel like I mishandled the situation. To say, forgive me, I'm sorry, what I did was wrong. I think that opened their heart and allowed them to let it be behind us and move on. And then, beloved, I think it's really important at the onset, very practically speaking, to vet whoever you're bringing close up front. So I would say it's very important for leaders to not be desperate and just hire somebody, but make sure that you've done your due diligence, as I try to do myself, before I bring somebody close. I've seen too many situations, particularly in ministry, where people have been hired only based on their talent, with no relationship that was established first. And this is simply unwise. In other words, I've seen churches, for example, that maybe they need a youth pastor, and they go online and they hire a youth pastor from another state, but there was no relationship that was ever built between the senior pastor and this youth pastor that's been hired from out of state. And I've seen situations like that blow up all the time. Whereas on the other hand, if they would have taken the time to build a relationship with the person first, or to recognize that they'll never be able to build the right type of relationship with the individual, and as a result of that, either not promote them or release them, they would have saved themselves a lot of headaches.